It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello and welcome to Accelerate. I couldn't be more excited to talk with my guest today. Joining me is Bob Perkins. He's founder and chairman of the AA-ISP, otherwise known as the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals, though you rarely hear it said all in full like that. Everybody knows the AA-ISP. And Bob has helped preside over a significant sea change in how sales take place in America. He's contrary to the belief of many, inside sales has been around for a long time. But now we're witnessing a revolution of sorts with regards to how mainstream business-to-business sales takes place, and technology is enabling more of the sales process to take place remotely, even with complex, expensive systems that are often being sold without a sales rep ever visiting the customer. So with my guest today, we want to talk about where sales is headed from here and the impact it'll have on your business. And so, Bob, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andy. It's great to be with you today.
Great. So, take a minute, introduce yourself, tell us how you sort of got from the beginning to where you are now running this organization.
Well, I'd love to share a little bit about my background. I actually taught school for a few years, and I didn't do too good at that. And people ask me why I got out of teaching, and it's because I tell them I taught 7th and 8th graders. And so
that will do it.
That'll do it. Enough said. But I started in sales back in the early 80s, and had a few years doing mostly field sales. Back then, telesales, as we call it, was a little bit of a novel idea. I had a chance to go to Unisys to be a manager of telesales, and really I didn't know what I was getting into. But I quickly found out that this form of selling via the phone, now remember, back then we didn't even have email. There wasn't really much of an internet to do research on, but I knew after just about a year at Unisys that I sort of loved the idea of trying to prove that, you know what, you can sell some complex big ticket items over the phone. It's just not a simple commodity sale. And so I sort of made it my mission back in the late 80s and early 90s, kind of made it my mission, if you will, to prove that that telesales, as we called it, really could do almost as much as the traditional field sales. And I think, Andy, the rest is history. I moved from there to Silicon Graphics, and then United Health Group, and then finally Merrill, which I've retired from. But along the way, I built teams and really tried to improve inside sales. And I knew many years back that we had no resources. If we wanted sales training, we'd go to a traditional company, like a Miller Hyman, Dale Carnegie, which was fine. And I knew back then that there wasn't anything specifically designed for the finer art of remote virtual selling. And I had the idea of someday we need this association resource, and eventually got around to forming the association, and here we are today.
So when did AA-ISP start? When did you guys start this?
Well, that was officially started in 2009, and I had sort of put a framework together a year or two before that, and we eventually got around. Everything was just right with my career, and my business partner Larry Reeves. The time was perfect to launch it because we both had a little bit of time to put into it, and we started it out very small as really just, hey, let's do this one conference. And if we just do one conference a year, that'll be great because we really need it. The community needed it, and of course we grew beyond my wildest dreams in many different areas, not just conferences.
Sure. So how many members do you guys have now?
We're about 11,000 members.
Wow.
Represented by about 3,000 companies.
Excellent. So here's a question. Have we reached the point where we can stop calling it inside sales and just call it sales?
Well, I think we're getting close to that. And quite honestly, as I talk and describe what we're doing, I talk more in terms of remote or virtual sales or digital sales. The term inside sales, though, does play it plays an important part of describing the function, because people now know it as inside sales. Business development is a form of inside sales, but they call it sort of business development, right? The lead generation people.
Sure, the sales development, right?
Sales development, right? And so, yeah, we're kind of getting close, and that's an interesting question. I think the term's going to be around for a while, just because it's a descriptive term, and people still use it, but. The certainly, to your point, there's a line between what I'll call traditional field sales and then inside sales. Those lines have, they were starting to blur many years ago, and they're continuing to blur. And both of those, what we know as traditional field sales and inside sales, they're really doing like 95% of what they do is the same, right?
Yeah, and I mean, so much of field sales is done remotely these days too. So I mean, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I think that blurs the line so much. And I work with CEOs, and I'm coaching them and helping them put their plans together. Say, okay, we're going to build a sales team. We don't distinguish between saying, oh, we're going to build an inside sales team. We're building a sales team.
Right.
So
yep, exactly.
So what are some of the big changes that you're seeing occurring in, we'll use the term inside sales for our conversation today, in inside sales sort of in the short term? Because there have been some fairly significant changes, some being driven by technology, some just sort of by the specialization of the roles themselves.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Let me comment on the specialization. Specialization has been around for a long time, as has sales development, right? Sales development has been around almost as long as inside sales, yet people think it's kind of this new phenomenon. It really isn't. What's happened is, backing up a little bit, I believe when we started going hard with marketing automation, right, using tools that just deliver up, we'll call them warm leads. Mm-hmm. There's so much out there happening with these leads that we need to staff up to really handle them, and that's what I think you've seen. That's one of the changes. People are staffing up. I mean, the growth rate of sales development and inside sales is through the roof. I think that's part of the reason. The other reason is because it's being driven by the customer. Customers, we know through research, want to interact digitally the same way they do in the evening when they go shopping on Amazon. They want that same experience in the business-to-business purchasing process, pretty much, by and large. They don't want to open up a conference room and have a dog and pony show come in. They want to click. They want it on their mobile. They want it if they need to. I say if they really need to, they pick up the phone. So even the phone is getting less and less critical to this whole buying movement, if you will, and because of that. Now you take a sales rep that's, and I'll sort of take your lead here. I'll try not to use the word inside sales, although, Andy, it is near and dear to my heart. But
yeah. No, I said for the purpose of our conversation, let's use the term just so we're clear.
Okay, yeah. So today's inside salesperson, what's changed for them is a significant requirement in skill set and full length of the sales process. And what I mean by that, just to draw a comparison for those listening here, if you go back 10, 15, 20 years, it was primarily a phone-to-phone skill, right? Mm-hmm. They need to be a good communicator. Yeah, they needed to know about their product and so on and so forth. But more or less, it was a team selling approach. Yes, they did close on their own, but it was more of a team selling approach. Today's rep, the movement from a predominant teamed model, that's inside team with the field, has migrated to what we call a discrete model, where the inside rep now is owning the quota and owning the full sales cycle. Not that they didn't 20 years ago, they did in some cases, but it was 85-90% team. Today, we've almost surpassed the team model as the most predominant inside sales model. We're almost there, and I predict in the next 3 to 4 years, discrete will be more predominant than team. So what does that mean for the skill set? It means I got to be good at social. I got to know my LinkedIn. I got to be a good virtual communicator. I have to do screen-to-screen selling. Oh, and I even need to be good at video, because video is starting to take hold. And I got to propose. I got to negotiate. I got to handle objections, and I got to close.
But it seems like the question I'd have is that what they've been relieved of is, given the specialization, is the prospecting. So that's a change. I think when you maybe start with Unisys is where somebody really did handle the full cycle from sales development, prospecting, all the way through close. Or today, though, the inside account execs really are sort of been relieved of that because we have these specialized sales development reps that are handling that task.
Well, interestingly, Unisys had a lead development team. Okay,
very good.
Yeah, but you are right in that today we have more companies that implement sales development that then hands a inside rep an appointment. Okay, so you're absolutely correct that has been a growing change, if you will, over the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
But now back to this skill set. I interviewed a vice president of Oracle Direct, and Paul McCurris said, Bob, he goes, 10 years ago, all I worried about was making my quota and forecast. He goes, today, all I worry about is finding enough skilled reps to backfill, to fill positions. And so what's happened is you couple growth of jobs, sales development being part of that. You couple that with a much higher skill requirement, and the law of supply and demand says we have a shortage. So we today have a shortage of the skill and experience required for the positions we hire. And guess what that means? Now training, and we study this every year through our top challenges research. Our inside sales leaders tell us, number one, hiring and recruiting. Number two, training and development. Right. So we're trying to keep up with the explosion that's happening, and we're not quite keeping up with it.
So that triggers a couple questions for me. Then is, given sort of the breadth of skills that you're talking about, the inside account executive needs to have.
Yeah.
Would that argue for even further specialization so that, gosh, now we have our sales development reps, and then maybe there's middle of the funnel reps. The people are really good at demonstrating, talking about the product, discovery, and then you have those that are, more customer focused, closers, and so on. I mean, do you see that potentially happening?
What I do see, that's a really interesting question, by the way, and I haven't thought of it in exactly those terms. But we do see some companies saying, hey, we're gonna have sales development, and then we're gonna have your typical hunter and farmer. So they go sales exec, which is more of your net new closing, and then your account manager. We clearly see that. But I've heard some conversations around this. Do we kind of add a demo expert in there? And some companies are even experimenting with, I'm going to use the term systems engineers, really,
Yep.
that kind of are in there doing their thing in the middle of the cycle. So,
and that real story gets back to your team approach that you had at Unisys, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's one of my beliefs is that there's nothing new, right? Yeah. I mean, we can say this further specialization is new, but as you start using these terms, it's really the same old thing again, except in a different envelope.
in a different envelope. And here's another one. Here's a cool example. Back to my Oracle friend there, Paul, who ran a big piece of Oracle Direct. They did a reversed team model. This is really interesting. So in a traditional team model, you have one inside rep working with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 field reps. Mm-hmm. And the inside rep was kind of the coverage, and the field reps tossed them some leads or easy deals or whatever. So what Oracle did was they took a patch which wasn't really, it was kind of a green field, they called it, really an untouched patch. And here's what they did. They put 5 inside reps covering this geography that ran it, that owned the quota, and then they teamed them with 1 outside rep. And the inside reps would work stuff, and when they needed face-to-face support, it's kind of the opposite.
Oh, very interesting.
They called the field rep, and they found it to be pretty successful. And that, you know what that points out? That points out the virtualization of the buying and selling process is where it's at, right?
Well, but also to some degree, what it points out, I think maybe at least to me, I mean, the more salient lesson is you can't get rid of the human to human face to face altogether. At least in larger relationships and more complex deals, is at some point somebody needs to see a person. But not as much as we would have thought, 20 years ago.
Right, exactly.
But it still exists some level. And I find that very, 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 very fascinating way to do it. Yeah. I mean, so as you said, sort of turning it on its head. And that makes a lot of sense because, occasionally you need to have somebody has that face-to-face, that somebody can put a face to the company. Because if they're not, the competitor may be coming in there and doing that and really stealing the business.
Yeah, and even when I went out and studied Salesforce.com out in San Francisco 6-7 years ago, they had a pretty interesting inside-outside model. Their mid-tier customers were handled by inside reps, but they labeled them as hybrids. So they could travel as needed. Granted, they weren't out in the field 100% of the time, maybe 10% travel, right?
Yeah, I think accounts, and this is a lesson I think for people listening, is depending on what you're selling and the complexity of what you're selling, the value of what you're selling, is there reaches a point and a size where having some face time with the customer really becomes essential. Because, and it doesn't mean a lot, but if you have a competitor that's in there walking the halls, leveraging their network, talking to people, you're going to be at a disadvantage ultimately because you may not be finding these opportunities that would exist if you are just able to get people when they're available on the phone as opposed to sort of making time to go see them.
Well, there's, we could sit here and debate, certain industries and certain professions lend itself, I think, better to leveraging face-to-face resources than others, right? But as a general rule, we just know through all the research that's been done out there, we just know busy professionals. There's a reason that online purchasing has gone through, continues to increase year over year. And I think the same thing holds true for business-to-business decision makers,
sure.
Right? And we know they get a lot of their information online. We know that, and through their peer groups. So it just makes sense that when, as you put it, when you talk to companies about deploying sales resources, you're looking at probably mostly sales done virtually.
Oh yeah, in every case, right?
Yep.
So, and the thing that's interesting is that really, by and large, it's been that way for quite some time. I mean, I can go back, 20, 30 years myself, and I was selling large, complex systems to companies all over the world. And, I maybe saw, if I was selling something that's worth $10 million, I may have seen the customer 3 times before I sold it to them. But the rest was all done at that time, was done over the telephone.
Well, I tell this story, Andy. the AA-ISP, we've made 3 or 4 significant software purchases. We use Salesforce.com as a CRM. We use Acton. It's like a Marketo. Oh, we have and we have never, of those 3 or 4 significant purchases, we've never met anyone. And I get a call, from my Salesforce.com account manager. Hey, I'm going to be in Minneapolis. Can we do lunch? And I'm like, well, no, I'm traveling. I'm kind of like, just leave me alone.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. All right, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back after the break with Bob Perkins talking more about the future of inside sales. Hi, this is Andy. Connect and Sell is used by sales reps at nearly 1,000 companies, including hundreds of technology startups and several Fortune 500 companies, to overcome the challenges of getting prospects on the phone. Companies using Connect and Sell grow their revenues faster by enabling their sales reps to have more sales conversations in 90 minutes than they could otherwise achieve in an entire week. Connect and Sell can be deployed directly to your sales reps, or you can take advantage of their outbound on-demand service, which delivers qualified prospect meetings scheduled directly on your sales reps' calendars. Visit connectandsell.com to learn more about how Connect and Sell can start filling your pipeline today. All right, welcome back. My guest today, Bob Perkins, founder and chairman of the AA-ISP, the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. So one of the topics I want to jump into here is, you talked about training before. And the current sales training model, to me, is broken, right? Yeah. It's irretrievably broken. And so, sir, what's your vision of how that can be fixed now? Especially talking about, we've got this incredible growth in the number of sales development reps and account execs, inside sales teams really growing pretty rapidly. What's your idea of how we can do a better job of educating? I don't want to say educating, as opposed to training, educating the sales force.
Yeah, no, you know what? I wish I had a perfect solution. I don't think there is necessarily this perfect way to go. Here's what I can tell you. Number one, I can tell you that there's sales trainers, there's training programs. I mentioned Miller Hyman, I think, earlier. Things like that I do believe provide a good foundation. In fact, a few years ago when I hired a new inside sales rep, I sent them to Miller Hyman because I do believe it gives a good foundation. The problem, though, is that they really don't teach any of the nuances that are critical today. Give you an example. Using LinkedIn. Okay, that's a foundational requirement today for an inside sales rep. But you have to really dig hard to find out some training on it. So I think to improve the training process, and let's talk about third-party trainers, they need to take these buckets of skills and experiences for inside sales, specific to inside sales, and really build them into training programs. And I mean things like the use of social media, things like modern day prospecting, right? And there's some firms out there that do a wonderful job with modern day prospecting. But if you think about that, a lot of training firms, the traditional ones, they fly right past that. They may talk about, uncovering someone's needs. Well, that's good, but how do you draft an email? How do you draft an email today that might get open rates? How do you leave an effective voicemail? How are you using social? What about presenting a demo? Demos today, even by field sales, are often done screen to screen, remotely.
Sure.
Well, let's put some training in there about effective virtual presentation. So you have all these skills and these things that people need to learn. And we need training companies that embed those actual pieces into their training. That's number one, And then number two, we talk about coaching and call recording, and we've eliminated some excuses. because in the day when I was coaching, how did I do it? It was called a splitter, right? So I'd sit there with a rep, and I'd put on a splitter, and he or she is making calls, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and they get through to like 5%. Oh, we got one. They're too busy to talk. So I might sit there for an hour, and if I had one good phone call in an hour, it was a lot. So today there's technology out there that'll queue up recordings and just deliver to the manager just the good calls they want to coach to. So coaching is really a big piece.
But it seems like one of the things problems we're running into at the management level, especially given the rapid rate at which some of these teams scale and so on, is that it appears to be they're too metrics driven and less coaching oriented. And so I'm not seeing enough skills improvement taking place that could take place through coaching, because the managers are under pressure to make sure that the reps are making enough calls and so on and so forth.
Oh man, you're so right. It's a vicious cycle. I kind of went on a little bit of a crusade many years ago about, get out of your dashboard. Stop measuring dials and what and things like that to only to say you got to make more calls. It's ridiculous. I mean, making more calls, is not going to deliver. It's just going to deliver more bad results.
Well, exactly. Yeah, right.
So
here's a question for you. This is one that's a big one of mine, and one I'm spending a lot more time talking about with audiences and so on, and managers and the like, is that we seem to fundamentally not understand productivity. And so people conflate more quantity with productivity as opposed to outcomes with productivity. If productivity measured in typical economic terms is, measure of output for a unit of input. Well, no, if you talk to most sales managers these days, it's especially in an inside sales sense, it's like productivity is how do we go from 40 calls a day to 50 calls a day per rep, as opposed to saying, how do I go from $1,000 per hour of sales hour invested to $2,000 revenue generated for sales hour invested? So how do we make that transition?
Well, here's what I've tried to do over my career, which I think helps. Again, I don't necessarily have the perfect answer to that. If I did, every company would grow revenues 30% a year. But I do believe you got to take a look at the most productive sales reps. You got to look and see, what are they doing differently? How are they doing it? Is it simply, is it more calls, right? And I got to tell you that the initial most rudimentary activity pieces, such as you put it, going from 40 to 50 calls, is not the thing that I've seen over the years make reps better. I've seen things like really, really good persistency, meaning they may call somebody and leave voicemails and the person had some interest. They won't let that go. And they will, professionally, persistently bother the person until they, get back in front of them. Mm-hmm. I've seen people that don't take a no and then, retreat for a long period of time and get, kind of put down and then take a while to come back and be positive. They take the no's and they forget about them. They go on to someone that they can get a yes from. So there's the aggressiveness, the persistency, the ability to create passion and excitement in their voice, right? How they actually communicate. And that has a huge impact when you're selling virtually. So I think it's some of those things that they're hard to teach, but you can model them And I've been fortunate. There's so much that goes into how you hire and how much money you pay. There's so much that goes into what I call building, really at the highest level of leadership. It's called building a high-performing organization. What are those things you want to do? Because you and I can walk into a sales floor and we can tell within an hour of just listening and interviewing people, is this high performing? Is this a really, kick butt culture, or is this something that, people are just punching the clock and they can't wait to leave?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, now you're talking, these things you can't measure in dials. You just can't. So anyway, I don't know if I answered that question.
Oh, no, you did. You did. That was a good attempt. So, all right, we're going to move into the last segment of the show. I've got some questions I ask all my guests, and I lead off always with a hypothetical scenario, and everybody answers it. So I'll give it here to you. And here's the scenario. You've been hired as a new sales leader at a company whose sales have stalled out, and a turnaround needs to take place. So what two things could you do your first week on the job that would have the biggest impact?
Well, the very first, and I've been in that situation. So the very first thing I would look at is the current leadership in place, because leaders, even frontline leaders that manage people, are critical to an achievement-oriented culture. So I'd inspect, I'd replace if needed, I'd do whatever. So that's number one. Secondly, I would meet one-on-one individually with each of the sales, people, and I would interview them in depth, right, about the job, about their activity, about their performance, about even about them personally, right? Because when a leader does that, they'll get an immediate pulse on what's working, what's not, what needs to be improved. I mean, I have a whole outline of 4 or 5 things that I would look at, right, as I do these interviews, right? Leadership, recognition, current activity levels, all this kind of stuff.
Okay, excellent. Good answer. All right, so now we got some rapid fire questions for you. You can give me one-word answers, or you can elaborate as much as you want. So when you sell, what's the most powerful sales tool you have and your personal attributes?
It's making it about the other person. Make it about them. Get to know them first before I even talk about what I'm selling.
Okay. So building that rapport.
Yep.
So name one tool you use for your own sales management that you can't live without.
It's more of a process, but it has to do with meeting with the salespeople in a non-traditional performance meeting. So that means taking them to lunch, and you may have a business discussion around that, but meeting on their terms in a kind of neutral, traditional sort of coaching or performance setting.
Okay, excellent. Who's your sales role model?
Oh, sales role model. That's a good question. I've never really been asked that. My business partner, Larry Reeves. Yeah, he's been he's developed into a role model for me, just around more around his negotiation ability, which is part of selling, right? Getting agreement. He's really good at it.
Okay. What's the one book that every salesperson should read?
Oh boy, this is going to be a book I recently read, and it's called The Sensational Salesperson. And the reason they should read that is it gives lessons about things that nobody will have ever taught you, either in person or another book. It gives you lessons about what to wear, lessons about how to treat people, all with a selling context in mind. It's a great book. It's by a guy named Dwayne Cummins.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll look that up. I haven't heard that one. I'll see if we can get him on the show. Yeah. Okay, now here's a tough question. What's your favorite music to listen to? What's on your playlist?
Oh, I love, and I play. I'm a guitarist myself, and I love Southern rock and roll with a little bit of country thrown in there.
All right, so like Leonard Skinner.
Oh yeah, Eagles.
Marshall Tucker.
Yes, you got it. You're hitting the nail on the head there. Allman Brothers Band.
Allman Brothers. Yeah, I've got the greatest hits lined up. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. I like that. So, last question for you. What's the one question you get asked most frequently by salespeople?
I do some mentoring. I work with a lot of people, and one of the questions they ask me a lot has to do with advancing their career. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Questions like, hey, if I want to move into management, can you give me some tips and how I can prepare to do that? So it has to do a lot with, them looking to be someone who's advanced my career up through sales leadership ranks. And, they want to tap into some of that expertise and, tips on how I did it.
And your answer is?
Oh, the answer there, it really depends on who I'm talking to, because there's a lot of different things. But number one, I tell them that, their advancement is 100% their responsibility, right? Number one.
Right.
And I give them ways to do that. And I said, I would say nothing replaces work ethic and passion. And make no mistake about this one. If you come in a few minutes late and leave a few minutes early, and this is just one tiny little example, make no mistake about it that your manager knows whether the manager is right there.
Absolutely.
So I kind of get down to some of the real nitty gritty basic stuff when we had that conversation. So.
All right. Well, excellent. Well, good. Well, I want to thank you for being my guest today. Joining us has been Bob Perkins, chairman of the AA-ISP. Bob, how can folks find out more about the AA-ISP?
Well, you can, there's two ways. One is online, since we're virtual. We're talking virtual sales here. But you can go to our website at www.aa-isp.org, O-R-G. That's one way. Secondly, I would encourage everyone to get out to a city near you. We have 60 plus chapters around the world, 45 in the U.S., 20 some internationally, and chances are near a local AA-ISP chapter. You can come and visit as a guest. They typically meet once a quarter. They have presenters, and you get to network and you get to share ideas with like-minded professionals. So.
Excellent. All right. Great ideas. And Bob, thanks for joining us again. And remember, friends, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. And subscribing to this podcast is a great way to do that, because then you'll make sure you don't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Bob Perkins, who share their expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining us. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.